My message this morning is the gift of grit and how to get it. Now, part of me wanted to retitle my message as, Are you grit or do you have grit? Because that's the operative question today. So what is grit? And what is meant by the expression that someone has grit? Well, I looked it up. Grit is an interesting word. It can mean two totally different things. A grit can be a terrible thing when it gets under the shell of an oyster or some other mollusk and threatens harm and irritation to the creature. A grit is described as a small stone, a pebble, a particle of dust or sand. But this same grit that causes an oyster so much trauma stimulates the oyster to secrete substances onto the surface of the grit to protect itself. And this happens over a period of 3 years, and this irritation becomes a beautiful pearl, perhaps even one of value and great price. I have read that based upon the size, the shape, the color, and how shiny or thick the coating that the oyster placed around the grit, it can range in price from $1 to 100,000s of dollars. And there's some beautiful pictures of different kinds of colored pearls online. I wasn't aware that there were that many different kind of colors. Beautiful. Now, when a person is said to have grit, it means that they have the courage and they are strong enough to succeed at what they set their hearts on achieving. People who are said to have grit believe in the possibility of their success, and they're willing to work toward their goals, even when the way forward isn't clear, nor the path sure. I think it's interesting that a person who learns to value themselves as an expression of God and boldly lives a life of meaning and purpose and in service to others, humanity and all of life, is said to have grit. Such a soul in God's kingdom is considered a pearl of great price. So, are you a grit or do you have grit? We can choose to be a grit. We can choose to be like a stone, a particle of dirt or dust. We can get under the skin of others and be an irritant to them in the way that we think, the way that we speak, and the way that we relate to others, blocking the flow of God's good in our own lives and frustrating this same flow in the lives of others. Or we can choose to be what a grit undergoing an oyster transformation can become, a pearl which can bring value, joy, and blessings into the lives of others that receive our presence. Lolly Daskell, President and CEO of a company called Lead From Within, says that grit is what separates the good from the great. And in an article that she wrote, she gives us 15 signs for what to look for to tell if we have the grit that we need to succeed. Now, this success can be in business. It can be our goal to have loving relationships. It can be a goal to have a wonderful marriage or to be able to have a thriving, supportive home environment, a career or a job that we love. We can be on a mission in which we feel that success is important to us. Here are the 15 signs. Most people who have grit have some combination of either all of these or some of these signs or traits. Number 1. Oops, my screen is gone black. Okay, sorry, we're having trouble. Okay, I'm going to keep going, assuming that you can see and hear me. We regularly sacrifice comfort. One of the signs is that we have enough grit, is we regularly sacrifice comfort by stepping outside of the box that we or society have made for us. If we have grit, We know that we don't have to settle for the limitations that others place on us, or even the limitations that we placed on ourselves yesterday. We believe that we have the ability to create who we want to become if we have grit. Number 2, we stay the course until we succeed. Grit gives the ability to focus and to keep moving towards our goal. Number 3, we maintain our commitment even when we are knocked down. Having grit means we know how to fully commit to the cause. We bring hard work, good ideas, ambition, and commitment, which stands the test through time and troubles. Number 4, we use our intuition when most others would use their rational mind. When we have grit, we trust our gut. When we feel in our heart that something needs to be done, we set about making sure that it gets done. Either we do it ourselves or we delegate. Number 5, if we have grit, we are courageous despite our fear. We can keep moving when others are paralyzed by fear. Grit is finding the courage to do something that terrifies us. As Dr. Susan Jeffers says in a book that she wrote with this same title, we feel the fear and do it anyway. Number 6, when we have grit, we keep going even when we're not sure that we can win. Grit tells us that it's important to succeed, but it's not all about winning. The journey is as important as the destination. Number 7, we don't allow anything to get in our way. Grit means that we are prepared for any obstacles that may lie ahead, and we do what it takes to get through those obstacles. And number 8, if you have grit, you can see possibilities when others can't. And perhaps this means that we're able to look longer and harder for these possibilities if we have grit. Number 9, we don't take embarrassment to heart or personally. When we have grit, we don't have to be or feel humiliated or mortified by our mistakes and failures. We refuse to give up. But we know that failure is just a learning experience, and we learn what not to do again, and we move on. Number 10, if you have grit, one of the signs is that you accept support, but you don't rely on it. Grit means that we can use help and accept help when it is available, but if we can't get it, we get it done. We find a way to get it done on our own. Number 11, if we have grit, a sign is that we learn as we go and we stay flexible in our thinking. Grit makes us constant learners, seekers, explorers. Having grit, learning is something that we do in every new experience or encounter because our mind is open to new discoveries. Number 12, you forego perfection for having high standards. When we have grit, we don't get bogged down in trying to be perfect. We know it's not perfect. It's not possible to be perfect. Instead, we strive for the best quality that we can achieve, and we have high standards. Number 13, we stay positive even when the situation is negative. Grit means we may experience negative circumstances and attitudes, but we don't let the negativity keep us down. Grit leads us to conscious choice to stay positive when things are negative. You know how it goes. When things or people go low, we go high. Number 14, you care about your return on investments. Grit means that we're willing to put our heart into something, but we want to see a return and a value from it. Whether this is money or some new knowledge or a better understanding of something, we expect some return. And number 15, if we have grit, one sign is that we set priorities. We understand the difference between being busy and being successful, and we align ourselves and our actions toward these priorities because these move us toward achieving our goals. Now, how many of these grit qualities do you see in yourself? Quite a few, I hope. On Friday, when I was working on today's message, I was so saddened to hear about the transition of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was 87, and she died of complications from pancreatic cancer. Ruth Bader Ginsburg's life and work was made a tremendous difference in this world, in our country, in establishing justice and equal rights for women, for black people, and other minorities. I read a poster which said, "There is no truth without Ruth." Get it? Just take off that first T. Ruth was a mover and shaker on the Supreme Court. But even before President Clinton nominated her for this position in 1993, the notorious RBG, as she was fondly called most recently, since the movie about her came out, was a 5'1" giant on the Supreme Court. Her life and her work showed that she was the perfect illustration of someone who had grit. Ruth owned those 15 signs of a person who has grit. An article that I read explained how influential her mother was on her. Celia Bader, her maiden name, Amster, died just the day before Ruth's high school graduation. But even in the short time that the two had together, Celia instilled in her daughter, Ruth, how valuable an education, especially an education for a woman, is. Ruth's mother had dropped out of school at the age of 15 to work and help put her brother through college. Ruth called her mother the most intelligent person she had ever known. At her 1993 White House press conference announcing her nomination to the Supreme Court, Ginsburg wrapped up her remarks with an emotional tribute to the woman who was never allowed to reach her full potential. She said, "I have a last thank you." And she told the assembled crowd, "It's to my mother. My mother was the bravest, strongest person that I have ever known, who was taken from me much too soon. I pray that I may be all that she would have been had she lived in an age when women could aspire and achieve, and daughters are cherished as much as sons." Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a graduate of Harvard and Columbia. And it was interesting to note that when she graduated, it was hard for her to find work simply because the law firms were reticent to hire a woman to be among them. Chief Justice John Roberts said, "Ginsburg was a tireless and resolute champion of justice, a jurist of historic stature." Ginsburg married a wonderful partner, a lawyer named Marty, and it was a marriage of equals. A marriage of equals. They supported each other in all the ways that they could. Ginsburg was an extreme lover of opera. Although she wasn't gifted with a singing voice, she did participate in some non-speaking parts in some of those operas. In terms of her lawyer practice, she argued and won numerous civil rights and women's interest cases. She said she loved it when Sandra Day O'Connor joined the Supreme Court. Oh, my screen is blank. Okay. She said she loved it when Sandra Day O'Connor joined the Supreme Court in 2006. And then, 3 years later, in 2009, Sonia Sotomayor joined the Supreme Court. She said she was no longer lonely because now there were 3 women on the court. Ginsburg voted repeatedly to limit the use of capital punishment, and she helped to have it declared unconstitutional for states to execute the intellectually disabled and for them to to execute killers younger than the age of 18. Ginsburg fought for women to have the right to decide issues pertaining to their own bodies. She authored powerful dissents in cases involving abortion, voting rights, and pay discrimination against women. Ginsburg had battled a number of different cancers for 20 years since 1999, but after each surgery and chemotherapy session, she was right back at work on the Supreme Court, doing the work that she loved. She never let her health get in the way of doing what she considered the greatest job that any lawyer could ever have. And our country has been so blessed to have Ruth Bader Ginsburg do what she loves doing. Godspeed to you. And as you move toward and onward toward your next position, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, I'd like to share another story about a friend of mine who showed grit recently. Her story might be more relatable on a personal level to us. My friend and her 10-year-old daughter were in Salina visiting the Rolling Hills Zoo, and they decided to stop by and visit me for a short while. When I saw them coming through the window there, I ran back in and got my mask, and we stood outside distancing ourselves on the walk between my house and my neighbor's duplex. I loved seeing them, and it was so difficult to resist giving them a hug. As we neared the end of our conversation, I inquired about her daughter's two different socks. One long, hot pink sock, and the other was a short, lime green kind of ankle sock. And the daughter explained the prototype for wearing divergent socks was started by her older brother at his school. She had begun wearing alternate socks in the elementary school where she had been attending before the pandemic broke out. She was very excited and energized while telling me how her brother had received so many accolades about the socks, and she had also. Others admired them for their creativity, for their independence, their courage to do something different, and their ability to not let criticizers bother them. It began a whole thing at school. And then my friend spoke up to tell me the rest of the story. She teaches adult students and runs a nonprofit business. When the pandemic struck and the kids were not allowed back in school, even her college-age son returned home. Her husband and she began teaching their students over the internet. And her children, once spring break was over, began classes on the internet as well. But the problem was that everyone was now home. And for my friend, this meant more household work. More cooking, more cleaning up behind the kids, and more laundry to be done. With her teaching over the internet and running her business, my friend was feeling overwhelmed and decided to ask the children to help with portions of the laundry. She asked that after she washed and put the laundry through the dryer, that the kids sort out their own play clothes, fold them, and store them where they belonged. As the children were old enough to help with this, she was surprised at their response to her call for help, but she was willing to go along with it. The kids decided that their mom could just put the pile of clothes on a table in the washroom, and they would just go and get whatever it is they needed from the pile when they needed it. The kids decided that they didn't mind that their play clothes or run-around clothes had wrinkles, and they thought it was kind of fun to pull out and put on mismatched socks. So this is how the trendy new thing got started at the schools. Now, I know my friend didn't prefer that her kids help in the way that they did, but she decided to relax and to let this go. At least they were helping to give her a little more time. And And she began to feel that if they were comfortable with wrinkled clothes and mismatched socks, she'd be okay with it too, at least for a while. What I realized is that my friend was showing signs of a person with grit. Number one, she was courageous in requesting help that she needed from her children. She spoke up for herself. Number two, she had to let go of preconceived notions of what was right and wrong for her kids to wear. If they were okay and happy, she should be too. Number three, she learned to be okay and to let go of what others might think. She had to be strong enough to weather any criticism that the neighbors might have had now that they were seeing that she was not the perfect mother, since her kids were leaving the house with alternate or divergent socks and some wrinkled play clothes. In his book, Soar, Build Your Vision from the Ground Up, Reverend T.D. Jakes gives advice for how to be successful in business, but not only business. As I mentioned before, anyone who wants to create a successful relationship, a supportive home atmosphere, or a successful marriage can use the suggestions that T.D. Jakes has in his book, Soars. In the chapter called Growing Forward, Jakes informs the readers that making any kind of change presents risks. He writes that doing something new and different means that you will have to take risks and take more risks, and then get comfortable with the way that the risks and growth go hand in hand. Doing something new, something different means, he said, you'll have to step out of the box that you or others may have placed around you, and you will have to move away from how you may have defined yourself. Maybe you've seen yourself as Miss Susie Homemaker, or the perfect I-can-do-it-all mother. And you need to let go of that self-definition in order to be successful at what you seek to do, have, or be. And especially, you will have to move away from how others have defined you. The key to success, says Jakes, is never to let the crowd define you or confine you. People, he said, get used to seeing us in certain roles and only exercising certain capacities. And the most successful people are willing to move away from how they've been defined in the past. The box where everyone expects them to be and everyone expects them to stay. This is what makes having grit so helpful. A person needs grit to make their goals successful. How do we get grit? We all have grit. We may feel at times that we have less grit in some areas of our lives than others, but we can work on ourselves to develop more if we feel a need for it. In a wonderful book by Debbie Ford, called Courage, Igniting Self-Confidence, she writes that the culprit which keeps us from expressing our grit is fear or lack of self-confidence. And the way to rebuild our self-confidence is by improving our self-esteem. And this means loving all of who we are, our history, our flaws, our misgivings, our weaknesses, as well as our strengths, our beauty, our courage. True confidence, she says, divine confidence, comes from the deep knowing that we are spiritual beings, whole beings, expressing as human beings who are mysteriously and magnificently part of the one and not separate from each other. Our value is indisputable. Every single one of us matters. We each have a distinct gift, a unique, one-of-a-kind way of expressing the God presence in us. We are all parts of the divine puzzle. When we are rooted in divine confidence, the events and circumstances of our lives make perfect sense. We see how this affects our own life. If we are willing, we can use every experience to serve other people. we can experience the peace and the joy of knowing that we matter and all others matter and all is well. Just like the song we sang. We can, in this place of deep and abiding confidence, just be and allow our particular expression, contribution, and gifts to flow from a place that is real in us. When we know that we are here as part of a divine plan, confidence directs our every move, and we and all others are blessed. And we, instead of becoming or staying a grit, we become a person who has grit, and we become the pearl of great price. God bless you.